Welcome to this double program. For the first hour, Ivan Bevsk, and he's gonna lead a discussion between Mikael Berglund, Pernilla Berglund, Dragana Mladenovic, and Bojan Babić about Norrland and Balkan, the festival centers of periphery. And then for the second hour, Per Bergström is gonna host a discussion between Andrei Nikolaidis and Steve Sam Sandberg about geographic, political, and space-time experiences from the same perspective. And both of these discussions will be in English. And now we're going to have a short video presentation.
Hello everybody. My name is Ivan Bevsk. I will be your host for this program. This is the first part of our program organized by Liffest and Crocodile Festival from Belgrade, Serbia. The topic is the centers of periphery. The second part will be right after this one, and tomorrow evening all participants will join one big program from 6 o'clock. Okay. Here we have our guests for today. We have two Serbian and two Swedish writers. We have Bojan Babić, Pernilla Berglund, Dragana Mladenovic, and Mikael Berglund here. The main topic for today is centers of periphery. The first question for you, I think it's good for the start, is what is exactly periphery for you? Maybe Bojan can start, please.
I hope this works, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. Please.
So there are like many peripheries because when we think about the world, we first, of course, think in the matters of geography and thinking about this Eurocentric vision of Europe or even the Western Europe being the center of some kind of culture and civilization, and then going east and south, it's like some kind of periphery like Middle East or Northern Africa. And then, of course, we start thinking about even the times of colonization and matters of orientalization as some kind of you know. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. And but there are some more aspects, of course, of this thing between center and periphery, not only geographic. In cultural terms, we can think about even in society, there is like we can think of male culture and female culture as center and peripheral. We can think about official art and culture, like the culture that has its own encyclopedias, its own prizes, its own market value, and this periphery culture and art that is actually going on in streets, or we don't see it in official institutions or something like that. So anything can be, and I think that we, even me personally as a writer, and we in Serbia do live in some kind of, we're not really on periphery as I see it, but we're on a border between center and periphery, which is like, can be in one way a really dynamic place, and in terms of subjects that we are facing and everything.
It gives a lot of opportunities,
yes,
actually, for a writer.
It gives opportunities, but even it can be a handicap in some other way, but we can talk about it.
What way?
Yeah. Because there is like always in this kind of periphery, in this kind of living between, there is this danger that we actually have this urge to close ourselves, to make border around us, because there is this some kind of, let's say, inferiority complex towards center, and the center is by nature closing itself towards peripheries, because it is a bit, it feels, I think, endangered a little bit if peripheral culture would like go to center freely. But we are even building those borders even higher, because we have this inferiority complex, and then we feel that our peripheral discourse might be something that is like given to us. It's like our destiny, you know, that we cannot build.
But do you think that some of the writers or authors actually enjoy this position of peripheral, because it's some kind of safety for them?
Well, yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem, because on periphery there are like people who say, okay, it's our destiny, and we can, if it's our destiny, we will try to find the value in it, and they find the value that there isn't there, you know, and they build it, you know, they make it like, okay, it's ours, it means it's the best in the world. So we are the best in the world, and we don't want, you know, to prove or yes, something like that. Yes. Yeah. But of course, there are on peripheral cultures, there are some people that are actually heroes of even the periphery and the center, and there are some kind of nomadic people that are ready to be absolute individual and to like be absolutely local within themselves, and that means absolutely universal. So they can like push those borders and be writer in periphery, in center, and wherever. There are some examples of people that changed their language, like now contemporary Hammond and yes, even before, like Nabokov and everything. There are hero figures. Earlier it wasn't that much, but now it's not even a topic, because there are so many of them changing languages they are writing
Okay,
about.
You mentioned something, and I would like to hear something from Pernilla. You mentioned interesting thing that there are a lot of peripheries, gender peripheries, topic, genre. So, for example, Pernilla, you're from periphery of Sweden. You're a woman, and you write poems. So, how do you feel? How you beat all these peripheral things?
Well, I think it's about perspective, and like, for example, of course, Stockholm is the capital of Sweden.
Yes.
But and so you see Stockholm as the center of things. But I don't think that people who lives like here in Umeå or somewhere else up north, I don't think that they always walk around thinking I live in the periphery. But of course, poetry is also not like a big thing.
Unfortunately, yes.
So it's a bit peripheral.
Yeah, but as you said, perspective. So, which means that if you find the right perspective in yourself, it's actually not a problem. You're focused on what you make. Not you don't think so much about how and who will accept it and read it.
No, I don't think a lot about
acceptance.
that.
Yes.
But I'm thinking about something that Per-Olof Enquist, a Swedish author, wrote in a novel called Captain Nemo's Bibliotek, and it's one of the characters in the book says something about they live up north, and they are talking about, I think it's a newspaper who writes about their situation, and he says or thinks something like they think that we are far away because it's so difficult to translate, but the point is that
It's a
he
better
thinks
point
that,
of view. Yes.
yeah, the point is that the
Who is
character
actually
says,
periphery, yes.
but we're in the middle of it. So for him in the periphery, he's in the middle of it.
And Dragana, we can say that she shares some of your experience. She's not based in a center like Belgrade, but in a small city which is near Belgrade. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And she's also a great poet. What is your perspective about this? Do you share her experience or Bojan's?
First of all, I think that living on the periphery and writing poetry, especially engaged poetry, is my choice. That is my choice, yeah. Yes. And it's maybe choice to be on the periphery, but on the other hand, I think that the most significant kind of periphery is emotional periphery. So if you don't share emotions with people who suffer because of wars, crises, and other stuff, with people who are not your compatriots, and we have such a situation in Serbia. We don't like to have asylum seekers in our neighborhood, and I wrote a poem about it with sentences of people who are against that fact to have asylum seekers in their neighborhood. So I think that if I write poetry, which is part of good values, if I write a poem about asylum seekers and that situation, that I'm not part of periphery.
You speak about
yes, we are.
one
then
really
we are.
important
if
topic.
If we share good values, and if we try to get better this world, I think that we are not periphery, no matter about where we are living and which kind of literature we write.
Mikhail, what do you think?
What do I think? I agree with former speakers in everything. I agree that I don't find myself living in periphery ever. I never considered that thing.
Mm-hmm.
I always think about other people living in the periphery on my site. As far as I can see, that's my horizon is my periphery.
Okay.
So wherever I am, I have Stockholmers are the periphery for me because that's as far as I can see, and it can also be as far as Africa or South America as well if I see it on the news.
But do you think that actually this point of view is very important? And sometimes I think that if you are at a dislocated position, like from their point of view we are, actually we see the whole picture. You know, if we are the part of the center, then we are part of it, and our picture is not so clear like there. You know, so maybe we can really see the things different, and we are maybe more objective than them. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. And as well, also, if you have an experience of being peripheral to other people, then you tend to. Might be a tricky image, but if you climb a mountain, you can see very far. And
yes.
if you live in the periphery for others, then you climb mountains to see very far, and you see what they are looking at. And from that mountain, you can see other directions as well. I think it might be too complicated an image, but
I understand. Yes.
Close as I get.
We spoke also about it's like some kind of cliche about some smaller cultures, and then big cultures have some expectations when they look toward us. For example, when they take a book from a Swedish writer, they have some expectation about what he's or she writing about. Also, when it's some writer from Serbia or from Balkan, do you, as a writers, as authors, feel this? Do you think that you should write in a cliché to be recognized abroad in so-called centers, or you think it's really not important? Let's start with Bojan.
Well, me personally, I don't really feel the pressure because I'm not even that translated, and I think that I have that ambition.
Do you think you would be more translated if you write like this?
I don't know. I guess maybe. I mean, there are some topics that are probably expected from different kinds of peripheries. So, for example, if we are talking about people from Serbia. What is expected is to, hear trumpets or to hear Goran Bregović, see Kusturica, get some crazy people, and I don't know. And when it comes to literature, it's expected to write about the war, consequences of war,
some traumas, some
transition,
poverty,
that everlasting transition, and clash of the civilization, and the impossibility or possibility of immigrants to become the parts of new societies wherever they go. So that is something that is expected. And it's not a problem that center expects something. It's a problem that when we start writing it to fulfill their expectations. And I mean, there is even a term for that. I forgot it. It's called self-ethnification, you know, so where auto-ethnification.
You try to fulfill their expectations.
Where I fulfill their expectations, and then I really pay for some trumpeteers to, play those crazy trumpets on the airport, even though they wouldn't naturally do it. So, and that is the problem when it happens, and we feel when it is fake. Of course, all that what is expected are actually good and legitimate subjects, and I do write about them. It's just a matter of how do people do it, And of course, it's not only about Balkans. It's probably when somebody's reading African author, they're expecting to write about colonization and then what happened after, or when they watch Swedish movies, they expect characters like Saga Noren or something like that, I guess. So it's on us not to fulfill the expectations
but to feel what we really want to write.
Yeah, but I don't know if we will stay. Maybe we will stay in national, literatures if we don't do what's expected.
Dragana, what do you think?
I think that if you live in Serbia and you write, then if you forget social moment, it could sound as national
Science fiction.
Science fiction.
Science fiction.
It could sound like science fiction novel if you forgot of society and if you write.
But do you think these political or economical issues could be put on the side and then to have like a regular love story with just a small impact of these things, just to show to the readers that actually it happens in Serbia, not in Sweden?
Yes, but we have such a literature in Serbia, but it is...
Is it good literature?
No, it's not good literature.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's not good literature because there is no... It doesn't open important things.
Is it necessary for literature to open?
I think, yes, I'm engaged author, so I think that it is important for me. Yes, it is important.
Bojan, you think so also?
Yeah, of course. Because I think that we really, for me, my goal is to, especially in the last two novels, is actually to search. I look at the people's lives different, and to find this moment where something is broken, and usually it's always about society. It's always about violence. Even when it's personal or family violence, it's again, it has something to do with the society as a whole. So and then if they build on their lives on this bad, on this bad start, their whole life will be bad. So I try to find this moment where it is broken. That's what, at least when I read myself.
Do you think your colleagues have something to write about? You know,
Of course. None of the societies is perfect. So I'm sure that if I would live in Sweden, I would be, you know,
you will probably find
auto-chauvinist
something.
as well.
You know,
Yeah.
let's ask her.
What's the question?
Yeah, what's the question? Well, we just move slowly to another question. Actually, he mentioned that all these things which surrounds us in Serbian Balkans, like wars, problems, poverty, crisis, it really reflects on writing. And the good writers are those writers who really use these topics and include them in their stories as a very important subject. But let's say that Sweden is a much more regulated society than Serbia. But I guess there is so many problems and so many, as he mentioned, broken things that you can write about or just include in your novel to show these, I say, wrong things or in your society. What do you think about this?
Well, if I'm going to think about it like in center and periphery questions, I'm thinking about the north of Sweden. It's to the south of Sweden, it's like a colony. Still.
Really?
Yeah. It's like the north of Sweden have the mines and all the trees and
so
the rivers.
So you feel used.
Yeah, all the resources. So north of Sweden is like a colony, and I think it's.
And the most of the people live in the south of Sweden, I guess.
And all the money is in the south of Sweden as well.
So it's becoming political at this moment. Yeah.
But well, and I think that's you can see that
important?
in the literature here.
Is it important subject for you?
Yeah.
But do you use it in your writing?
I don't know if anyone sees it, but I think it's,
but you're trying
it's
to
there. I'm interested in
as an echo in a back.
yeah, in places and borders in the country and.
So who wants, he will recognize. Yes.
What did you say?
Who is interested, he will recognize. Probably. Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, you're sending the message.
But when I heard Mikael talk about his book yesterday, I really thought about those questions.
What did you say about your book? I wasn't here. I was in the airport. So
yeah. The story focuses around a young woman living in north of Sweden in the 17th century.
Okay.
And at that time, the colonization started from the south, and we found silver in the mines up here, and as well started to tax the Sami people for reindeer meat to fund the wars. Actually, that's how the colonization started. And for my main character, this is just a backdrop for her life, and she sees these things start to happen, but she tries to avoid them, and she moves in the periphery of the central events of the northern Swedish history. Actually, if you can find a temporal periphery as well.
So this is actually a story which says that periphery always suffered from the center.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, you can say that.
Even in Sweden, even in your society.
Especially in Sweden, I would say. For me, as a Swede, I would say it's not a foreign subject at all. It's very present at the moment, speaking about the peripheries of Sweden.
But there is also another question I wanted to ask you. Writers from Sweden, we very often hear words saying Scandinavian, and they as sometimes people say Balkan, and then Balkan is everything there, usually something bad and wrong, but Scandinavia has much better. It sounds much better, but for us, sorry. And Scandinavia as a subject, as a thing. How do you feel in that? Do you think it's actually not good for you as a culture, putting it all together, because there are some things we think first, Scandinavia, it's like, okay, crime stories or something like this, or you think it's advantage?
I think it's a really advantage, and I think we should use it much more. At the time when my book, I'm not trying to push my book, but at the time that it happens, north of Sweden was not Sweden. North of Sweden was Norway to Russia. So all the way from the Norwegian coast, Atlantic coast, all the way to Kamchatka was the same people. more or less.
Yeah.
We traveled all along the taiga. So Scandinavia is even too secluded area for that. And as a northern Sweden, we feel vicinities to Finland and to Norway more perhaps than to southern Sweden.
Really, you're more connected in some way.
In some ways, yeah.
Some way with them.
Yeah.
So there are no really these borders are really not really important.
No, and
for you.
No, they're not, and especially not to reindeer, because if you hunt reindeer, they
They
really
don't need passports and nothing.
No, they
Yeah,
don't.
okay.
They don't know how to use them.
Okay, but is it same with you? How do you cope with this?
I'm not sure, actually. I think, like Mikael, that the history is like the north of Sweden has a history that's more connected than with the south of Sweden.
Yeah, you had these changes of borders, probably like we had in our countries.
Yeah.
So actually, people could live in one part and then to change a couple of countries. Is it?
But
yeah.
well, you asked about literature today. And
Yeah, I'm asking about this Scandinavian thing. Do you feel yourself as a part of a Scandinavian literature?
Sometimes, yeah, I think it's because I can read in Danish and Norwegian, and that's then you feel like closer to those countries because the language are almost the same or similar, but not Finland. It's
totally
not so
different.
easy, but
story, yes.
and the societies are pretty similar as well, I think.
Do you think it's a good thing because when we speak all the time about this periphery and then maybe problems with periphery, going together with this, like using this word Scandinavian and using it as some kind of a brand towards outer world, it really makes you stronger. It really also gives you more possible readers. I didn't know that you can read. I didn't know that you can read in Danish or
Okay, but
Norwegian.
it's not so difficult to
It's not
understand.
so difficult. So, because we have the similar situation in our country. You know, it was former Yugoslavia. Now there are a lot of countries there. But for example, countries like Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, and Montenegro, they share one language which is more or less the same. It's just like dialects of the same language. So actually there is a market of 20 million people who can understand each other. And I personally think that we don't use it as it's possible.
That's
So
exactly like here, because we don't read Norwegian.
But do you, for example, translate from Norwegian to Swedish language?
Yeah,
Yes,
you translate
regularly.
a lot. I don't know how much.
What about
but,
movies in a cinema? Do you have a subtitle?
Yeah,
Okay, it's better than to have a voiceover. I think it would be stupid.
but I think I like to that people are translating from like Danish to Swedish and the other way. But I also think that we should read more in Norwegian and Danish than we do right now.
It gives you wider picture. Yeah, but Dragana, do you think when we speak about the same topic, when they say Scandinavia, we say Balkan or ex-Yugoslavia? Let's be more precise because it's more close to us. Do you feel these ex-Yugoslavian republics as your potential market, and also are your readers there?
Yes, that is potential market, but some association with when you say the Balkans, you always think about war in Bosnia, and you think about transition and some bad. I suppose that you can have bad
Association,
ideas.
association with this.
About
But
it.
okay, let's say ex-Yugoslavia.
Yes.
What's your experience with I guess you visited different places around in Croatia, Bosnia. What's your experience? They definitely share your thoughts and they live in the very, very similar societies.
Yes. I was in Sarajevo last year, and I read one poem from my new book. It is a poem about hatred towards gypsies. And I created that poem using jokes about gypsies, Serbian jokes about gypsies. And the other part is without word gypsies, I put Serbs. So it was a pretty strange situation when I started to read it in Sarajevo, because I afraid that they will maybe smile, yeah, laugh when I start to read about Serbs so critically. But they were calm. It was funny for them when I read them jokes about gypsies, but they were pretty calm when I started to read about Serbs, because the gist of that poem is anti-fascistic, because I said, aha, zikhal now. Okay, it's very funny to laugh to gypsies, and now let's try to see what will happen if we put some other nation in those jokes, which are our jokes. So they reacted very as the Serbs.
Yes,
but
yes.
I was afraid
Of course,
their
but
reaction.
it said something. It's something that actually we are, no matter how small we are always ready to laugh at the smaller and the minority of minority, which is really not good. Bojan, you
I
also
do feel like a Scandinavian.
yeah, no, but also. We had a funny situations when some Serbian movies had translation in Croatia. You know, it was really funny. But do you think that that your books are totally the same for the readers from Croatia or Bosnia, for example?
Yeah, I'm quite sure. I mean, I have some proofs, because some of my books, especially this latest one, is really well read in, maybe even better read in Bosnia than in Serbia. So, and I got good critics in their newspapers and everything. So it's really, I mean, we do share experiences, and that's the point. I mean, when I was a teenager and when the war was going on and everything, I really wanted to, I was pissed off and I wanted to ignore it. So I wanted to, you know, it's not my identity. This Yugoslavian or Serbian or whatever's going on there, it's not my identity, so I ignored it. But then when I grew up, I mean, I really realized that first, it's not real to, you know, ignore what I've experienced. It's stupid. Try, and it's better for me to try to make something out of it that makes sense. And those experiences are really, I think, more or less the same for all of those countries that you were talking about, that share actually not only language but experiences. It's even more important than the language. So I think it's. Yes, I do have those experiences, and that's it. I would you know, change it for some other experiences, but I cannot. So that's okay.
When you're talking, just one more question for you. What are you doing for a living?
Well, I'm writing commercials, scripts for commercials.
It's
yeah.
an interesting topic, you know, because why I'm asking that, because all of you are doing some jobs, some, let's say, proper jobs. You know, you're not this writing, which is like a joke or something. No, but actually, okay, you're aware of this, that from writing is actually not possible to live, especially not in Serbia, but in most of the countries. When you were choosing your job, did you choose your job, or the job chose you?
Well, I maybe had, you know, 2 picks, so this is like one, you know.
But this is actually some kind of creative job, and you are using words, and you're creative with words, and you found your way. But do you think that you are actually spending your creativity in that, and how do you manage to balance your daily job and your writing?
It is awful.
Because writing is now also periphery in your life because of your job.
It's awful job. So anybody who is thinking about becoming a copywriter, don't.
Why? You get these great awards, the Lions in Cannes.
Yeah. No, but I think, you know, it's not only about, it is actually, I was thinking about, you know, doing this some kind of cultural managing or something, but this is even closer to writing than that. Mm-hmm. But what happens in this job is that you actually become a huge misanthrope. You really start hating people because you see only the worst in them. So. And
what?
you are talking to worst in people, you know.
You're trying to force them to buy something.
Yeah.
You
So,
say
yeah,
that.
Yeah, and this is something that I get mad about, and I use this madness, to write in my literature.
Are you afraid that your bosses will recognize this or themselves in your novels?
No, I don't care. I mean,
They don't read books.
They don't. No, they do buy them. But
Really?
I don't know if they read them.
But is it maybe better to work something which is totally different and to save your words for a novel?
I'm not sure. I mean, nowadays, especially in this wild, neoliberalist capitalism, it's whatever you work, you will work at least 10 hours a day and go home dead. So you will. I don't know where do I find energy, but if I wouldn't write my prose and my literature, I'm sure that I would be even worse in my job. So it's better to be stressed all over than
so
to.
This is actually therapy for you to write and to release
Well, I
something
wouldn't say.
from
I
you.
mean, that would be no. It's not just.
Okay. But Mikael, you are also doing something which sounds very creative for me. You are actually you're in digital business.
Yeah, I'm in marketing actually.
Marketing
Even
and
worse than
digital
copywriting.
marketing.
Yeah, but I'm also a social worker. So I'm a social worker, part social worker, part
You clear your
communicator.
conscience.
Yeah, actually, I'm buying my consciousness.
Buying back from the devil.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
And then I have a couple of hours in the end of the day to write and to kind of amalgamate all the things I've learned done throughout the day.
yeah, because I said like Bojan, okay, it's writing the periphery of your life. It's a periphery when you talk about how many hours you can spend on it, but actually it's at the end of the day it's probably in the center of your life.
It
this
really
writing.
is. It's a thing that I think about all day.
So this is actually not perfect world because the thing you love most you spend the least of your time.
Yeah, but that's not a problem in itself because it's very good hours.
So it's productive.
No.
And Dragana, you're actually your
I'm
main
a
job is a
journalist.
journalist.
Yes.
What kind of journalist? What subjects you are covering?
I'm journalist in local weekly in Pančevo. Its name is Pančevac, and I work as editor of culture, and it's very nice job. But my main job is writing, and it is the same situation. I spend the last.
But you see yourself
day.
as a writer, not as a
Yes,
journalist.
that is my basic job,
But do you
and I like it very much.
But
I can't
okay,
leave
you
it.
were lucky actually because you found a job in a culture in a journalism because then you can cover topics you are interested in. I
Yes,
guess.
but those are two different jobs
Totally.
for me. Yes, but yes, there are words, but it is completely different.
And Pernilla, what's your daily job?
I don't have a regular job right now.
It's Sweden, yes.
No,
Rich writers.
not rich. I've been a student for a long time, and
Okay.
before that I used to work at a school with children. But right now I am just started to be an editor of a literary magazine.
Okay.
But it doesn't like it's not so much money, so I can't live
everywhere,
on it.
yeah?
So I have to find a job.
But do you think journalism is a good way for you?
No, I don't think I'm a regular journalist. It's something else. I don't.
You still
think-
don't know. You still don't know, or you
I don't see myself as a journalist,
Okay.
and I don't think I want to work at a newspaper. So I don't have the education for a journalist.
You don't need education to be a journalist. Come on. Okay. I'm always asking. Do you have something to ask each other, or just to say? Maybe I missed to ask you something. Please feel free to say something if you want, because I was really boring asking so many questions. Or maybe audience have some questions. Please.
Thank you. You asked what is the periphery, and I'm asking you what is the center.
Center. Well, it's a good question. we made this as we are positioned as a periphery to let's say first as a periphery of for example Europe. If you look at Europe, we are on geographical peripheries. Also, if you look at the cultures, you have like English language, French language, or German language, even Spanish and Italian are really big languages, and then they dominate cultural scene not just in Europe but around the world. So our position is probably definitely peripheral. But also the other thing was that actually our positions, for example, here, if you speak about north of Sweden, we also have periphery of periphery, which is also interesting. But I think that the conclusion is also that each periphery can be a center of itself if it produces enough quality in each creative part.
Center, I think, is the. I mean, we are now always talking about the periphery as something beautiful towards center, but of course it's not always the case. Center is, I guess, the place where the rules for canonizations are made globally. Yeah. So we are always.
Do you think they make rules?
No, it's not like something they do consciously. It's like what happens, you know.
Yes.
And peripheries are always defined by the center, even if periphery is trying to ignore it. So center is important. And even if I've been living in small town for quite a while, when I moved to Belgrade as some kind of local center, I didn't become smarter, but I did start working more because I was really lazy in small town, and because centers are always more competitive, and you have to.
Yeah,
you know,
time is running much faster in a big center than on periphery. We all know.
So
that.
I would always choose to live in a center, I guess.
Even of periphery.
If I would have a choice.
Even of periphery. Pernilla, did you want to say something? Yeah.
I was thinking, as you, but also that the center is also, it has to do with power and money, I think, and well,
we gravitate, want it or not, yes.
Yeah.
Center is to share values with world, with Europe, and to write about good things and to write about bad things, of course, to improve them and to make them better.
Mikhail, your conclusion.
My conclusion, okay, my final words. Center, home is where your heart is, kind of. The center is where you collect the power to change the world, and that could be anywhere. Actually, could be anywhere, and especially nowadays when we have such a big network of friends, we could meet people we've met now we wouldn't have met 100 years ago, probably. Actually. So there's a bigger opportunity for us to make new centers today, and the centers don't have to be geographical. They can be cultural. They can be formed in many
I think
different
there
ways.
is a really big story behind that. We don't have time for it, but now in a new digital world, there is also centers that are totally changed. But this is for some next story. Anybody else have some question? If not, I just must say that we owe big thanks to Swedish Institute who helped us to organize this event. In June, all our guests from Sweden will visit us in Belgrade in Crocodile Festival, which will be, I think, great. You saw some photos from that. And I invite you, of course, to stay here because in 30 minutes we will have the second round table. And tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock we will have a big night with all these writers reading their work together. So thank you very much for this.
So, welcome back to the second session then of this Crocodile Liffest event. My name is Per Bergström and I'm here with Andrei Nikolaidis and Steve Sam Sandberg. And as a start, I'm going to give you some small Wikipedia-like information about them. Not Wikipedia, really. Andrei Nikolaidis was born in 1974 in Sarajevo in a Montenegrin Greek family. When the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina erupted in 1992, he returned to the Montenegrin town Ulcinj, where he lived as a child. Andrei has published 6 books, It has been widely translated, and for the novel The Sun, he was awarded the European Prize of Literature in 2011. Also, The Coming was translated into English, and in June, Deviat 9 will also be published in English. Andre is not only an acclaimed author, but also an outspoken columnist and journalist that publicly has been defending the victims of torture and the rights for minorities. Words that has actually meant that he has been threatened for life also publicly. He is a known anti-war activist and also an activist for Montenegrin independence. Steve Sandberg was born in 1958. In the 70s, he wrote a number of books, mostly science fiction, but he himself considered his second debut in 1987 with The Ansiktslösa as his actual debut. Since then, he has published a dozen of books, novels and essays, and in his novels, he has a characteristic style of mixing fiction and historical fact, and documents to create an historical presence, but for most literary portraits of persons affected by the today historical time when they were living. This has made Steve known as one of the most interesting novelists in Europe, and his novel The Emperor of Lies, som de flesta av nog känner till som De fattiga i Woods. Has been, yes, as you know, awarded with August Prizes and published all over Europe. Steve is also active as a translator, critic, and editor. He lives in Vienna, a city right in the middle between Malmö and Podgorica. So I thought that I would pick up from the previous talk here and ask you about center and periphery. As you all know, and maybe some of you are very glad for, Umeå is no longer the capital of culture anymore. But I was realizing when I was preparing this talk and also these short presentations that this descriptions of you and your writing, the word Europe comes back all the time. And I was wondering, Steve, your novels are often referred to as great European novels where you write about European topics. I would say universal topics. But how do you relate to that epithet, like the great European novel?
I thought you said the great American novel, not the great European novel. I haven't read any great European novels. No, for me, it's more like a personal thing. I was never a very private writer. I'm a very self-reflective person, but I looked for my subject matters often very far away from me. Like, for example, I wrote a book about a German terrorist in the 70s. It's called Ulrike Meinhof, and I'm not German, as you can hear, and I'm not a terrorist, which I hope you will, at least for the moment, accept. And I'm not a woman. So this topic being very far from me was also the way I, for some very strange reason, could also work out some traumas of my own personal matters in this form, but very far off. So maybe me living in Vienna, being a European author, great or not great, I don't know, but anyway, also being far away from Sweden is maybe my way of getting out of this mess that Sweden is.
No, but I would say also in Sweden, in the Swedish context, I would say that you, Ulf Peter Hallberg, and Aris Fioretos are very often mentioned as Central European writers or Middle European writers, to talk with Claudia Magris. And I mean, you don't have that much in common. You write essays, you live abroad. Or why do you think we need to give you that.
But the point, in my case, it's not so difficult as it might seem. I mean, in the end of the 19th century, Swedish writers actually went abroad. August Strindberg lived for many years in Berlin and in Paris. That was a natural thing. And for many Scandinavian writers, it's the same thing. They go to Berlin. Maybe not so many go to Vienna, but anyway. And I lived 5 years in Prague, so for me, this has been a natural thing. That's a natural step for me to take. But I don't go abroad purposefully looking for my subject matter over there in Central Europe or in the Balkans or wherever. But I look for subject matter that suits me. And I'm a novelist. I'm not an historian. I'm not a politician. Not anything like that. But I find my personal subject matter maybe in the traumas of Europe in many ways. I wrote a book about a Nazi ghetto established in Poland with in the city of Łódź, and the important thing was not that it was a Nazi ghetto, not even that the subject matter was Jewish. The thing that was important for me was that people actually were fenced in this small area and had to fight for their own life and also fight for their own moral rectitude, so to speak. And that was the subject matter. That was what interested me. The fact that it was Second World War, Europe, Middle Europe, or no, was not the main thing. It just happened for historical reasons to be there. But the interest from my point of view is strictly has to do with literature. And the way that novels can kind of come to grips with a reality that's so multi-layered, so complicated, so morally vague, and in that sense also morally challenging, that you only can find that kind of subject matters in certain places. And for example, in this book, it was in a mental hospital in Vienna, for example. So that's the way they go. It goes through me first, and then it comes out in Central Europe, not the opposite way.
So, but it's also like, how these characters of your books, the multi-character, react on this very hard situation that they are in, and it's not bound to them.
Yes. In the book that's called The Emperor of Lies in English, it's also translated into Serbian and Croat and many other languages. The main character is Chaim Runkovsky, who was the Judeälteste, as he was leader of the Jewish community there, and he was the one who actually had to administrate the murder of the Jews, because that's the way the Nazis worked. And there again, you have the moral ambivalence. Did he do a good thing in trying to save as many Jews as humanly possible, or did he do the bad thing in order that he didn't put up enough resistance towards the Nazis? Well, there's not one correct answer to this question. The answer to this question is Runkovsky himself.
But this is something that worked both in Therese and in...
exactly, and that was also the thing about the Meinhof book. I mean, what was she actually doing or being? Was she a terrorist, or was she only called a terrorist because the German state couldn't cope with that kind of resistance at that time?
To go back a bit where we began then, Andre, with Montenegro being the smallest country in Europe, and since you are here, you have a very high percentage of writers, and also being one of the newest countries or renewed countries in Europe. How do you relate them to that term of European literature, as also being the winner of the European Literary Prize? What?
First of all, I hope you'd be kind and forgive me my really bad English. It being bad is only a part of a problem. The true thing is, during years, I realized that I have a different opinion on same topics when I'm speaking in Serbo-Croat, my language, and I'm speaking in English, because when I'm speaking English, I actually stand for the thing I'm actually able to say. So, let me explain you what will happen today. Yes, of course, Montenegro is a periphery, and Ulcinj is on the periphery of Montenegro. It's on Montenegrin-Albanian border. That means that's on border of terra incognita. I'm on the periphery of periphery, which is exactly where I want to be, because I think sometimes, or I just pretend it to be that way. Sometimes it is quite nice to look at big things from a certain point of view, which is not really from behind, but from the side. And being aside is I believe, a good position for a writer or a person who have some kind of literary ambition, who have ambition to contemplate about things, world, etc., etc. Look, for us, it's not only that we are a periphery in a geographical term, but also we are on the periphery of European time. We live some kind of a European past, you know. That's the thing, because that whole narrative about EU integrations, which is dominant in Balkans right now, is basically a narrative about us doing things that other countries did 12 or 30 years before us. So for us, travel to Europe is not only a travel through a space, but also a travel through a time. You know? So that's my position. I'm trying to see things my way as a young person with lots of liberal ideals. Europe was some kind of, let's say, utopia for me, and I will see at the end if it's actually dystopia. It remains to be seen.
But what do you consider Europe then? Is it EU or is it? What?
No, it is easy to say it's not EU, it's European values. Then we have to speak about what European values actually are. And that's the discussion we from Balkans are not really allowed to deal with, because we obviously don't know what European values are. We don't know what Balkan values are, and nobody really knows. Except of all those stereotypes about Balkans, but on the other hand, the thing about stereotypes is that they are usually true, you know. I certainly hope that it won't be seen as some kind of, that is a popular word right now in Balkans, auto-chauvinism, you know, like yourself hating your own culture. That's the thing, but as a matter of fact, I don't have a lot of nice or nice words to say about my own, let's say, Montenegrin culture. I think it causes lots of trouble in my life. So personally, I would rather skip it and change it for something different, mostly peaceful.
But do you feel then? Yeah, you said that you were in the periphery of the periphery as well, but your books are published in Zagreb, or some of your books?
Yeah.
And how would you say that there is an ex-Yugoslavian periphery also, or if we talked about European literature, and so would you say there is an ex-Yugoslavian literature as well, or are there?
I believe that post-Yugoslav literature really exists. That's the term I believe Boris Posnikov, a literary critic from Zagreb, introduced. Because there is obviously a whole generation of post-Yugoslav writers, authors who are not even pretending only to be Serbian, Montenegrin or Croat authors, but the authors who are thinking about themselves as some kind of writers who are continuing the work of the famous or less famous Yugoslav writers. You know, I see the former Yugoslavia as one cultural space, not a divided one, but the one
But
in
would you
whole.
say that is based on language? You have Montenegro, Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia,
but of
or
course
also
it's the same
Slovenia?
language with 4 names.
Yeah, but
That's
do
the
you
thing.
also include Slovenia and Macedonia and?
That's the other thing. The thing I'm talking about is mostly connected with that same language. Of course, we are very close to Macedonian culture and of course to Slovenian, but it's not the same thing. To be quite honest, it was not the same thing even in Tito's Yugoslavia. You know, for that reason we were never really. You know, I was raised in Sarajevo. We haven't learned Slovenian or Macedonian in elementary school, and people in Macedonia and Slovenia, they had to learn Serbo-Croat. So that kind of language centralism was the important part of Yugoslav project.
But then it's because since the 25 years in the country divided, I was thinking, with this term of Europe, and when I've been to Bosnia, when I've been to Serbia, I always hear that, yeah, we are not Europe, but Slovenia is Europe, and all of a sudden Croatia is also Europe. But
you know that joke about the trouble with defining what Europe is, because if they ask Croats, it goes quite other way, because if they ask Croats where the Balkans is, they will say that's in Bosnia and Serbia. If they ask Slovenians where the Balkans is, they will say it's Croatia. If they ask Austrians where the Balkan is, they will say Slovenia. For Germans, Austria is also Balkans. For French people, Germany is also with some elements of Balkans, and for the people in United Kingdom, the whole Europe is Balkans. So there is obviously a problem with defining what Europe or Balkans is.
So it's a large periphery. In Malmö, we usually say where Zlatan is, there is Balkans, but it's but in this, the connection with the other, if we talk about it as one literature, how has it been to kind of close up the ties with writers' unions and cultural workers from the other parts of
well, myself, I'm a member of Montenegrin, Bosnian, and Croatian PEN, so it works. So it works. Also, I publish my books in Croatia, in Serbia, in Montenegro, also in Macedonia and Slovenia. So, on some strange ways, that cultural space is really, I think, now, if not perfectly, then at least quite well connected, you know. And there is no reason to think, I don't really understand Balkan nationalists. I mean, why would you insist to be, for instance, only a Croat writer addressing only to Croat readers, reading on pure Croatian language, etc., etc. I mean, no point in doing that. You know, if you look at it, former Yugoslavia was kind of EU in small.
Yeah,
you know, it was a complicated structure which fell apart, and also it is in a way. Austro-Hungarian Empire was also kind of a complex structure, and I don't know for sure as a historical fact, but there are indications that the idea was to introduce the third part of the monarchy. The idea of Vienna of that time was to introduce South Slavic states as the third part of that complex state. So it is done before, I mean, of course not in such a large scale with EU, but I don't know, my personal experience is a Yugoslav one. I don't have other one, you know, so for me it's quite natural to think the way I'm telling you right now.
But you were nodding when Andrei said Austria-Hungary is a small EU. There's a lot I mean, of the great literary tradition in history in Austria that actually is based on this time and so as well. Would you say when you live in Vienna that this is present in the literary discussion and the literary debate in today I mean, I hear this very often that former Yugoslavia is compared to the EU, especially in former ex-Yugoslavian countries, but do they ever do that comparison in Austria, and do you think you could then go back to the literature from that time to see any parallels?
Well, I can add to your joke. This is the Metternich's famous saying that Balkans begins on the Landstrasse, the Wiener Landstrasse. So it's actually a few blocks down from where I live. That's where Balkan starts, and I'm on the other side, right? So I wouldn't know, but I really feel. I mean, the presence of that. You shouldn't say the Balkans, really. Yeah, Southeast Europe. That. And I very much agree that it's a cultural space, and the topmost part of that cultural space definitely reaches Vienna. There are many writers living in Austria, and there are also going connections all steps down in history. So it's something that is very, very present, and also something that is very, very present for many different reasons is, for example, the debate about the war, Russia and in Ukraine. You talk about what's happening in Ukraine with a completely different sense of urgency in that part of Europe than we do in our periphery of Europe. And I think that says a little bit also about the Stimmung, the thing that you were talking about earlier. What does it mean, Mitteleuropa, really? Because it's a world that's really transcends border in just the way that Andrzej mentioned here. That really you can. I mean, Vienna being the second largest Serbian city in many ways, right? And people living in that cultural context, coming from a different cultural context. That is the positive thing. But there's also this really urgent sense of threat. That something can easily fall apart, and that when you're faced with this acute sense of threat, you also feel the urgency to step up to the values, to really defend certain things. I mean, you can disagree what these things are, but you really feel the urgency to do that, and that is something that's quite different from I think the discussions that's going on in many Scandinavian countries. I mean, not to put too much emphasis on it, but there is a need for and a sense of urgency down there that I cannot see as clearly up here.
And the natural,
maybe I didn't answer your question.
The natural question for this topic, though, is: would you see that as a more centered topic of the debate of the discussion than that can be in Swedish, that it is more periphery here?
I think it's. I mean, Sweden was. I mean, I'm Norwegian from beginning. I was born and raised, born in Norway. So Norwegians did actually suffer the war, the Second World War. In Sweden, you didn't. And I think there is something. I mean, you can deal with this in many different ways, but the fact that the last war that Swedes fought for their own country was in 1809. That says a lot about the Swedish mentality. And living in Vienna, for example, which was really in the crossroads of Europe, when they're going to exchange spies, for example, with this thing with the United States. I mean, the spies came all the way to go back to Russia, but where did they change planes? They changed planes in the Sveshat airport in Vienna, right? In a far-off corner of this airport. That's where the Russian plane came and met the plane that they went from United States. So it says a little bit about this Viennese melting pot that is really on a very fractured line when you talk about the seismic activity, that kind of fracture runs through that city, and it also sharpens the sense for as for example this thing about Ukraine that's really a very big topic now. As of course the wars in the former Yugoslavia was at that time in the 90s, of course.
But Andre, there is also, we were talking about the Balkan nationalism and so on, and it's obvious that actually literature played quite a big part in this. And how do you see today? Unfortunately, we have nationalism it's growing bigger in all countries all over Europe, and also in a very strange European nationalist way, like a united facing someone else, someone other. There also literature plays a part. How do you see the function of literature in the nationalism, both supporting the nationalists like Milosevic, gathering the poets around him, and of course the way literature can work against it?
They say that that the disintegration of former Yugoslavia started with disintegration of Writers' Union of Yugoslavia, because that was the first institution that fell apart on that nationalist tsunami which took place at that time. There is one good thing. We had our nationalist dancing party, and for time, let's say for another 5 or 10 years, we are done with that. After that, we'll see. And there is no growing nationalism in former Yugoslavia right now. I mean, the situation in Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro is way better. It's growing Yugo nostalgia, amongst other things, and it is a certain determination that we should all become part of the EU, and hoping that we will get some benefits from that. And the interesting thing, lots of people were looking at Western countries, especially not as much EU as United States of the America, like some kind of Deus ex machina at the very beginning of war. Because I was 17 years old then, but I clearly remember how people in Bosnia, just like 3 days before the war broke, were debating. I mean, serious, educated people were debating, and their final argument is that EU and United States will never allow a war in the middle of Europe. Well, they allow it. We were wrong. But from those days till today, there is certain idea, and we simply don't have a better one. Maybe it's quite stupid, but we don't have a better one. Is let's join EU, let's accept those famous European values, and let's see what will happen. It can't be worse than it was in 1992, So that's what I was referring as some kind of utopian project, EU as EU. If you see, it starts with EU also. The word utopia, utopia.
But you told me, Steve, that you really. You want to step away from the politics and keep into the literature, but do you think it's possible to be this sort of what Danilo Kish called the humana poetica, like to stay away from that political debate? And
he's one of my favorite authors, actually. Also a writer living on the border, Danilo Kish, right, between the Hungarian and the Serbian border, and also having a Jewish background, and maybe his only way to survive was to insist that literature could exist without being an interpretation of any ideology or so, and this he did with utmost clarity, I would say, and he's one of the best authors, and one of those who has inspired me the most, actually. but I do think that. I do think that. And I think that as the problem with a viewpoint, this is for me. I mean, the problem with the viewpoint that literature should or could express some sort of political reality is that it's so very, very difficult to draw the line between actually trying to pinpoint something, like the kind of moral predicaments and dilemmas I talked about in my books. Does this person do right or does he do wrong? Is this good or is this evil? And it's very, very difficult to do that reflection of a reality, real reality, without taking sides, to put it bluntly. And I think that one of the things that literature really can do is to assert itself as literature is in itself a political stance. Do you understand what I mean? I mean, being true to the real conflicts, not only the thought-out conflicts that made the Yugoslav Writers' Federation fall apart, constructed conflicts, but taking on real conflicts and seeing that there is often no real solution to difficult moral problems. And you have to approach them from many different directions and also be able to see the other side also of people doing evil. Then suddenly things like good and evil, historical abhorrences of different kinds are not so easy to come to grips with just putting a label on them. And you suddenly start to understand that evil, for example, the thing we point to when we're up here pointing to Southeastern Europe, Jörg Haider, Sverigedemokraterna, who do I know? All these things exist much closer to ourselves than we even would be able to admit to ourselves. It's only by being very Kish-like, Danilo Kish-like, that you really can do that. Because if you step aside from this line, you will always be corrupted in some way, even if that was not your intention. You will be misrepresented, or you will be misinterpreted, or you will be taken as an excuse for something else. And this is personal with me, but it's also very important for me.
And you have this, I mean, Jaime Rutkowski in the Fatty Woods is a typical example. I mean, that's a horrible person to read about, obsessed with power. But I think you mentioned in the afterword of the book that what if the war actually should have ended in the June 1944? He would probably be described as a hero today, or maybe.
Well, that is exactly the point I was trying to make. But I mean, the point in my book is not Rutkowski, was he doing the right thing or was he doing the wrong thing? That's not the point of the book. The point of the book is that if you see from a different viewpoint, you could have seen him as doing the right thing. If you see from the opposite point of view, you will see him as being the incarnation of evil. And I think only the novel, romanen, we would say in Swedish, only the novel can really approach a reality as complicated as that from so many different viewpoints, so that in the end we will see that, okay, Rutkowski did what he did because he thought himself that maybe he could save a few people, but the result of the end game, or what actually happened was that he was considered to be one of the most evil perpetrators in history, although he was a Jew himself. And there we get into the heart of the conflict. Can the victim also be the perpetrator? And we have I'm sure that Andrei could give plenty of examples of that. Perpetrators feeling victimized, and victims starting to behave at a certain point as very strong and agile perpetrators, right? So either you take the victims part and you say we always have to defend the victors, and then you take a political stand, and I think that's commendable in many ways, or you try to understand the perpetrators. That's the historian right? Or you try to see it both ways, and then you have literature.
I know, for example, the Icelandic author Eirik Rönn Nordahl, in his book Evil, he has a nasty character, a neo-Nazi in Iceland, and to be able to like his character, he gave him his own childhood in the book. So he plays all the time at the same places he played in Ísafjörður, and he likes the same thing as Ísafjörður. When you put together your character, do you give them your own doubts, or do you see yourself in their situation, or?
Is it me, Rumkowski, c'est moi? Yes, maybe in a way I do. You do. I mean, really, yeah. But the point is that you shouldn't. There's no need to go very far away to discover the truth of being human. Or you don't have to cross many streets or go to many different countries and many different time zones to understand what it is to be a human being. You have it all around you, right? So you can use, I mean, for example, I just give you an example. In my latest books that was published in Swedish in this fall, and will be in English and German also, it's the book about the hospital Spiegelgrund. One main character is you can say the victim. He's a child being molested at that place, but the other main character is actually the nurse, and the nurse was only doing her job being a nurse, but and what is being a nurse doing a good job is to fulfill every order and directive she's getting, and if the doctor says give this and this patient this kind of doses of medicine, this is what she should do. So the problem is not the nurse. The problem is the system, because what happens when the Nazis take over this clinic, and the children are brought into this clinic, and the nurse suddenly gets the order: you should not give the children medicine so they get better from their infections and so on. You should give them poison in order to kill them. So where is the problem where is evil here? I mean, where starts and where ends the personal responsibility? In a Hollywood drama, for example, you would see the head nurse saying, oh no, I will never do that. And she will go out and she will come back and she will convince everybody, and there will be a small revolution. But this was before the war in Vienna. The nurse had to support her own family. Her mother was not working. Her father was for political reason, because he was not a Nazi. Actually, he was not a Nazi. The family themselves were not Nazis. But she did not have any other choice, and this was the only job opportunity she had, and it was the war, and everything was rationed, and she couldn't do anything else but to take this job. So how does she think? She, of course, says, I will think about this some other day, or I will put this aside for the moment, and so on, and so on, and so on. And then she is a murderess, quite simply. And so how do you deal with that kind of situation, and how do you deal with that kind of moral ambiguities? That is what literature can do, I think.
Do you feel, Andre, that this is... Oj, 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 oj. And I'm not even, I mean, as you said, this is, it takes place in Spiegelgrund, and I know Andre's favorite writer is Thomas Bernhard, and it was even this. So, yeah, well, we will continue on June 13 in Belgrade. So we will stop here, and then you're very welcome to come there, and we will pick up from here. So thank you so much. And